Good afternoon. I'm going to call the May 25th meeting of the Technical Advisory Board of the Louisiana Outdoor Forever meeting to order. Angela, you please call the roll.
Taylor Terrio on behalf of Brandon Burris. Here. Cheston Hill.
Here.
Theron Phillips.
Present.
Amy Preyu. Here. Sarah Krupa. Here. Scott Longman.
Here.
Brian Lazina.
Here.
Charles Sutcliffe on behalf of Zach Lemoyne.
Here.
Ray Herndon.
Here.
Emily Buxton on behalf of Lisa Kreisman.
Here.
Lauren Berg on behalf of Eric Johnson.
Here.
We do have 11 board members in attendance today. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, if y'all have had a chance to review the meeting minutes from Monday and have no edits, I'll ask for a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any opposition? Okay, the meeting minutes are approved. Also, you have a copy of the agenda for today's meeting before you. I will, after you have a chance to review it, if you have not, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as written.
So moved.
Have a motion?
Second.
And a second. Any opposition? Okay, then that is adopted. Our first item on the agenda is to consider coordination with the public agency requirements in the pre-application evaluation. This was asked to be added to the agenda, so I will open this up for discussion. Actually, since the chairman from the project selection board is here and standing, I'll ask him to come quickly to the podium and maybe give us insight from what the guidance was from the project selection board.
Thank you, Mr. Longman. Thank you, committee members.
Introduce yourself, please.
Brian McClendon, Undersecretary of Wildlife Fisheries and Chairman of the Project Selection Board. This component was in the statute listed exactly as it's written there. As my understanding of it was that we're receiving public dollars. It was general fund money that was put into the Louisiana Outdoor Forever funding, and that there was supposed to be a public nexus associated with any project that's working with an NGO to ensure that there's a benefit of the state, and this is not a private entity receiving federal dollars without any sort of, it's sort of benefiting themselves. I'm sure Mr. Garrett could say unjust benefit or something along those lines, and that there was going to be some sort of partnership. Leading up to this pre-application, there was about 2 weeks before, there was a question, I believe, came out of a steering call that y'all had on what would constitute it. Would a letter of support do that or not? I did reach out to the chair, the author of the bill, and had a discussion. And we said, we think something more than a letter of support would be necessary to show that relationship, because a letter of support doesn't necessarily show like an endorsement, a partnership, a sponsorship, so to speak. It just says, we like this, to have that nexus built. So I believe Mr. Garrett wrote some language that was talked about last time based on that conversation. I will tell you that his intent, my intent at the next project selection board meeting, to have a discussion and to finalize some definition of this, either what's a public entity and to clearly define the relationship. We understand that that was not clearly defined nor sent out to the public. So prior to this, I know that the discretion is going to lie on y'all's interpretation to some degree. We're providing the guidance that we have as an internal sort of discussion. And like I said, my discussion with the bill author, but that's sort of where we're at, is that it's supposed to be some, I was view it as a state agency, municipality, or subdivision government, like a police, jury, conservation district, water drainage district. And I have been consistent with that on radio shows and conservation conversations, any conversation I have, because that's sort of been my interpretation throughout the time. So with that, I'll answer questions or move on. Yes, sir.
Any questions from the board?
I have one just quickly. Just so can you clarify just when that, like the actual pre-applicants kind of understood that clarification?
It was never in there, Charles. It was
Okay.
never, there was never something sent out to everybody to do that. The only thing that did say was that language that's in that you see in the statute that says NGOs working in partnership with a public entity. And so in coordination. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board for Mr. McClinton?
Just a quick comment, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. So I think the confusion here, just from an NGO's perspective, comes into play in that a large component of our daily work includes working with federal entities, federal agencies, which are in the global definition, considered part of the public agency component. I think, what I wanted to just, ask is for consideration here in determining whether a federal entity, which more globally could be considered a public agency, would qualify. And if so, are there any, kind of reflections that need to occur as a result?
I see Mr. McClinton approaching the podium again.
Oh, sorry. You're asking my opinion, Mr. Herndon? Or is that just for general? In my opinion, the only fear that you have is that is, again, this is state dollars. So I think the nexus should reside in the state, because this money would typically be appropriated to either a municipality or a subdivision of some sort of government entity of the state. That's where the taxpayer dollars, I think, is intended. The other fear I have with the public, if any grant you do with a federal government. So if we do a grant with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, they're going to say, yes, we're awarding the grant, so we like this project, this and this, but it doesn't necessarily, granting the money doesn't necessarily show. I guess that's my fear, is just having the support of that entity, being able to disseminate, this is a grant award and this is a partnership, because just receiving a grant isn't necessarily a partnership. If that's the case, then there is no nexus, because the intent of this program is to get federal money down to the state. So anytime NGO would get federal money, then they would be in compliance with that, and it wouldn't have to have that secondary notion. And what I liken the two is just talking to, is if you have and I'll pick on DU because they're not here, but if they have if they're doing a NAWCA grant on someone's private property, a supporter of theirs, and they come to us to get the matching source for that, or they just put $1.3 million on private property without any sort of, using public dollars to enhance a private thing. Now, if there's a state or parish or something says, no, this benefits water quality, this benefits conservation habitat as a whole, that's that additional step of having some outside supporter, either at the parish, city, municipal, state level, saying, no, this isn't just benefiting this private person. This has landscape components, or, contiguous with other state properties are in line with this. So that would be my hesitation to that.
And I'm sure Mr. McClinton, no disrespect to our board member from DEQ.
Oh, sorry, DU. I apologize. I was talking, Mr. Penny's not here.
Oh, you said DU. I thought you said DEQ. Sorry. Okay, my bad. One concern I would have if we do change this language is that if the sponsor of the bill and someone who sits on the project selection board intent is for it to be a state entity working in coordination with NGO, and we change it, and then the project selection board meets and changes it back, what exactly have we done? But I'm open for discussion. Any more discussion on this topic?
So I think there's a couple things here, because there is some other programs, have one where it is in partnership. You just look for match. You just find a match. If that match is from a federal entity, great, if they can do that. But I think when we talked about this, both here and on the selection board, about this particular program, this program was to forward the planning, the vision, the needs of the state of Louisiana, and make sure that those things were being met in accordance with all of the other things going on within the state of Louisiana. So I would feel that if we kind of move that out to a public entity as being one federal, that doesn't necessarily keep everything in line. We can't have the same synergy with things. It's not the same building that we necessarily could. Management decisions change, all of those things. And I just, from discussions, and again, not having the chairman here or the bill's author here, everything else, I feel it would be in the best interest of this program right now to keep that as public entity, meaning state of Louisiana, political subdivision of state of Louisiana, as kind of expressed by Mr. McClinton.
Please repeat that.
Pardon?
Please repeat that definition.
Well,
What?
public entity, and I'm sure Mr. Garrett could go into what that means in the state of Louisiana, but public entity is basically the state of Louisiana, it's political subdivisions, those things that would fit the definition. As I used to be able to rattle this off, but yeah.
If
Cole's,
you're,
Cole's mic's red hot, so he can take it from there if you need to, but yeah.
okay, for your further research, what we've adopted kind of internally as guidance here at the agency is the definition that's used in Title 14, Section 13, which defines a public body in the state of Louisiana. That's a village, town, and city governing authorities, it's parish governing authorities, school boards, boards of the levy or port commissioners, boards of publicly operated utilities, planning, zoning, and airport commissions, any other state, parish, municipal, or special district boards, commissions, or authorities, and those of any political subdivision thereof, where such body possesses policymaking, advisory, or administrative functions, including any committee or subcommittee of these bodies in the paragraph.
I think, I mean, from what we've heard already, it kind of is made clear that there's a lot of feelings about what this definition should be and is. I think the problem remains that the applicants weren't aware of all of this discussion or what the definition should have been when they were preparing their applications. As we said, none of this was made clear to the applicants ahead of time. So again, I believe we should have a reconsideration of the applications that we did deny before and any possible applications that have this issue today that we haven't even looked at.
I guess my concern with that, looking at some of the first ones on my list here, is where do we draw that line? If we go down this path, where will it lead us? And do we just end up approving all applications if they have any kind of partnership with any type of entity? I'm not sure
I mean, I think
how you draw that line.
we should let the applications that were denied and any possible new ones, justify their case in the next 30 days. And if they don't justify their case, we can deny them at that point, since that wasn't made clear to them. And then I think for the full application review, we need much more stringent criteria to go forward with. So I think between now and the full application review, maybe we can flesh out these definitions further and bring it up to the project selection board for their approval, and possibly the bill author if that's necessary. So then once we get to the application stage, we do have a very robust process. As we've already said, this is just a pre-application, so no funds are going to be awarded now anyways.
I have concerns about a 30-day extension. We're under a pretty tight timeline here, and the clock will start if we act today on all the rest of these. The clock will start, I guess, tomorrow when the emails are sent, giving them the yay or nay. So if we add another 30 days to that, I'm not sure where that puts us, and that was not the guidelines that we put out.
Oh, how about, a week even? I think some of these people could probably get this done in a week.
Again, the only issue I have is, or one of the issues I have is that then we are not abiding by our timeline as stated in our manual.
Yes, but we also changed the manual 2 days ago. So, it seems to me that we could change the manual again if we had to. But I think, at this point, we're only looking at two that we denied on Monday. And I don't know how many we might deny today for the same reason, but that's only a few that we would have to review. 2 we could get through in 20 minutes, less than that, probably the way that we're doing this.
Mr. Chairman, just one more clarifying question too.
Sure.
You're talking about our own internal timeline that's in the manual. Are there other deadlines that create a sense of urgency? Does this money have to be out the door by the end of this fiscal year? Does it need to be lined up with some kind of other grant match program that we're trying to maximize? Or is it really just kind of an internal timeline that we'd established to kind of get it going?
Now you're having me try and remember too far back. I'm not sure what our end goal was when we were trying to have these out the door. There is no source of money that we're trying to hit with it. They're all independent. But I'm not sure if the chairman of the project selection board remembers why that deadline was important, or if that deadline was important. If we add to the
The
90 days?
deadline was we were just trying to get projects awarded. That was it. And y'all have gone a great deal of going ahead and posting the meeting. You had 30 days to actually review these whole things. So technically, if you were to do an extension or something, you would still be within that 30 days of the tab to review these things before the next sort of segment within there. But also, Mr. Garrett did point out, and I'm making an offer that's no one asked before, but y'all could provisionally accept anything that you think is a partnership, and then that entity just clear that up within the 90 days of the full application. So if y'all say, we think this is a partnership, we think this is good enough, and then that entity could have the 90 days, and then is like this Cole keeps saying, as long as the scope of the job doesn't change, it's still, the application is still the same. It's just they've clarified that partnership in their full application. Because I know we've talked about, if somebody changes their application from free to full, as long as the project is the same, if they end up finding another $50,000 and says, we're changing our budget, but the four corners of the document hasn't changed, then yeah, that's a sufficient thing. So that's also an alternative y'all can discuss if you'd like to. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that. And actually, you reminded me that we had 30 days to act on this. My immediate deadline was my personal deadline. I'm just trying to get this through as quickly as possible. So thank you for that information and reminding me of that. Thoughts on what was just said? Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, that's up to you. If you finish with discussion amongst the group, you can certainly invite the public to come up.
Well, let me just throw my viewpoint out there. The 30-day deadline is not as palatable to me. The possibility of a provisional application, it seems more palatable. And that's, I just wanted to say that before I forgot.
I think that's fine. I would agree with the provisional application. I don't know if we need a motion to reconsider the previously rejected applications
No,
under
we
this new
would.
timeline.
Well, I'll defer to our parliamentarian.
If you're going to do a motion to reconsider a project that was previously voted down, the person on the prevailing side would have to make that motion for reconsideration.
Would we have to amend the agenda?
I think that it falls squarely within the conversation that we're having now and how you're choosing to, treat those applications and how you're choosing to define coordination. And I think that this is a sufficient agenda item, but procedurally, someone on the prevailing side would have to make the motion for reconsideration.
Correct. Oh, before we go to a motion, is there any further discussion from the board?
Yeah, so one question that I would have is, what are we saying that they would provide to rectify this for provisional approval until they get, I think we're still waiting for a clear definition from the project selection board about what a nexus means and how much more thorough than a letter of support they would need. So I think if we're making a motion now, I think we have a meeting scheduled for June 7th. And if we were to make a motion that by midnight on Friday, June 2nd, if they could use that week to get a letter of support, I think we need to be clear on what we're saying is going to be needed in order to rectify this to I think we were saying that if they had a letter of support on official letterhead from a public agency, then that would serve for provisional approval until we have a clearer definition of what that nexus needs to be, cooperative endeavor, or whatever the case may be.
My only concern with that is you're letting someone amend a application that's already been submitted and the deadline passed. So it seems like an unfair advantage, but that's just my first thought on that.
It seems like they made the initial deadline of submitting a pre-application. So I don't think we're like opening the door to, any all comers in that sense. So that's just my kind of thought there. But I see where you're trying to draw some boundaries.
Just so long as that's narrowly defined, because we don't want to have a certain application that might be in here that is missing all kinds of information, but made the entry deadline. So push that through. Don't want to see that.
Yeah, I think, well, from where I'm coming from, where I'm strictly kind of concerned with this particular, confusion around what a partnership means and if that was how that was communicated to the applicants in the first time. So it'd only be, in my mind, it's like applications that were missing or incomplete on this, the partnership language, coordination with public agency kind of component.
Right, so there would be the motion we're contemplating is allowing for provisional or would it be the 2-week or whatever until our next meeting approval pending additional details about partnerships with a state entity? Does that make sense?
Well,
Or am I rambling?
until we have the clear definition of what sort of partnership with the state entity or local, political subdivision entity that we're looking for, I think all that we can do is require, maybe if we're going to pass, take a motion to consider allowing some additional information, it would have to be just a letter of support, like some of the other applications that have been provisionally approved had, when they didn't have that more robust partnership. All they had was a letter of support.
So this would be a provisional approval to the project selection board or to the next round pending this information.
Yeah, and I guess
think
just
so.
to make it clear, pending a letter from a state agency on letterhead, because that's the nonprofit applications that we passed through on Monday had that. That's what we considered like reasonable, right? From them was a letter from like LDWF or CPRA or whoever on
Correct.
letterhead. So I hear mumbling over here, but so I guess the motion would be provisional move to the next full application for any previously rejected applications pending a letter on letterhead from a state entity, not just state, and I guess state public, local or like parish entity. I think
I think you would have to just mimic the language, local governing authority, political subdivision of the state.
yeah,
or
state
agency.
agencies, political subdivisions of the state, including local government authorities. That's what's in the act.
Yeah, I think in the motion, we can just refer to Title 42, Section 13, the definition of public agency, to make that clear.
Mr. Lozina.
So then for my clarity, I don't know if I can get there right now. We would make that determination based on a letter of support from a public entity on letterhead. A letter of support's a pretty open-ended term that is different from coordination with an entity. I mean, we see this in a lot of different grants. We do it too. We have I believe it's a very good idea for the world to do this. That's great. I believe it's a really good idea, and we're going to be part of a management entity that oversees that is a completely different thing. That's done in coordination. The other one is just like, good luck. I hope you get the money. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I think this is just for us to get them through to the full application. I think between now and the full application, we need to meet probably multiple times to flesh this out and also bring it up to the project selection board and have them agree with whatever we're saying is a partnership versus just a letter of support. But I think, that's going to be 90 days worth of work. But, in the meantime, we're going to send this letter. And I mean, some of this might have to go to the next round of this whole process, if it takes forever. But I guess, we're just trying to get through this round at this point and learning as we go.
Well, and Brian, to your point, we had last week when this discussion came up, had given the flexibility of if you have any tie to a state agency or somebody who fits this bill, a letter of support even, we would give you provisional approval pending your full application, fleshing that out. So that was sort of an offer to kind of clear up the confusion through that.
And I do understand that, just trying to make sure we're all clear on, well, there's no there's probably 13 motions on the table right now, but if we do move forward, basically we'd be saying, we're gonna say reject what? Anything that doesn't have anything to do with anything on there. So that's kind of where I am, is trying to put the rails on that. So if the entity hasn't identified a public agency in Louisiana, a federal government, are we saying it's a public entity in the state of Texas? Can we rule that out? No offense, Mr. Garrett on there, but that kind of is where I'm going with that. So I just want to be, we all clear. If not, this meeting is going to go very, very fast. So, and that's okay too. I just want to make sure that we're consistent, because that's consistent going forward. Everybody's clear, because that's how we got here. So.
Right. And that was my first statement, was how do you draw the line after you pass this? But again, I open it up for discussion.
So right now we're talking about pre-applications only, correct? And
Yes.
then the full application, I think we need to also hammer out what type of partnership, what we want to see, because we don't want to notify them later.
No, I would ask the chairman of the project selection board that they meet prior to that and hammer out that language to give us the clarity we so need. And for the record, I got a thumbs up from the chairman. Any other discussion? There was a request for a public comment. I think we talked it well in circles. I'm not sure where we ended up, but
We have addressed everybody's and everybody angry at the same time.
please come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Karen Gotra, the Nature Conservancy. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My procedural question is, this group actually approved the manual itself, right? And it was amended internally, and I'm wondering if we could, what would the process be to, if there's still so many questions among this group, to send it to the project selection board? That I'm just curious. We're kind of deviating, I think, a little bit as I see it from our procedure.
My concern with amending the language ourselves is I think we're overstepping, and I'll defer to the general counsel, but I think we're overstepping our authority, since the project selection board is actually the promulgating authority in this relationship. It would be up to them to change the language.
So the project selection board was in fact the ones who finally approved the notice of intent that became the final rule upon which the manual is based. And my understanding was that they also, with the work that was done with this body, gave the final approval of the manual itself. Is that correct? So, obviously the technical advisory board has a role to play in what the manual looks like and addressing these very questions. But I think you're correct that ultimately the project selection board is going to be the ones who say, these are the attributes that we are looking for in these projects, or no, we disagree with this. So I think that's probably accurate, that the project selection board should be ultimately, if not steering these decisions, at least confirming them.
Yeah, they put the guardrails on it, and then we figure it out in between. So where do we go from here?
I believe Ms. Buxton has a motion on the table. It sounds like it's somewhat of a motion to reconsider some previously denied applications. And I don't know that she was on the prevailing side of that. I think her motion is broader because it's talking more of a, how do we handle these things as a whole moving forward? But I think reconsideration is a component of it. So if there's someone on the board who wants to take up that motion, who was on the prevailing side on her behalf, they can do so. If she wants to bifurcate her motion to say, this is how I think we should handle provisional acceptance of these things, and then then y'all can take up the reconsideration of one or more that have been denied in the past. You can do that, but I think that's where we're at procedurally.
Well, let's, if someone from the prevailing side could take up my motion, let's bifurcate it. I guess let's start with the reconsideration of the rejected projects under the provisional acceptance.
So to be clear, if someone on the prevailing side wants to address it all as a whole, because I think if you're bifurcating them, I think you need to figure out how you're going to handle them moving forward before you go back and reconsider
And
how
that
you've
was-
handled them in the
I was
past.
Going to request what that would consist of before I could
Yeah.
support that.
But I think her motion was, and I'll do my best to paraphrase it. I think the motion is y'all provisionally accept any pre-application that makes a reference within the totality of the pre-application to a public agency, whether that be state or federal, and then to apply that to any previously denied applications. Is that fair? Yeah.
I would, and we're not going to get into the friendly amendment or not, but I would ask if you're okay if we, and just to be precise here, state and federal is fine, but state of Louisiana and federal agencies.
I would consider that a friendly amendment.
I think that's a good point, Brian. I was thinking that same thing.
The Texan in me couldn't get around.
Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, Cole.
Understood. I cash the paychecks every 2 weeks. So Mr. Lazina, you were absent. I don't remember how your proxy voted.
I think I'm cleared to make this.
I think you're on the
motion.
prevailing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think my chair, this chair was on the prevailing side. So what I'll do is I'll first part of the motion for this going forward that we consider when it comes to I was going to use coordination, but when it comes to a tie back to a public entity, we'll say state of Louisiana or federal agency going forward, or federal entity going forward on there. Given that, I would also say we should reconsider the 2 applications that were found to be insufficient at the Monday's last meeting on there. Happy to clear up anything if that's not clear, but hopefully is going to that. And of course, I will say those are potentially provisional, not to make it muddy, but provisional movements towards that, pending action from the project selection board to refine what is meant by a public entity on.
I'll second that motion if it's the appropriate time.
Is that clean enough, General Counsel?
I thought it was very well stated. I'm glad he did it so I wouldn't have to restate it.
Sure. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Do we need roll call? He's talking. I guess we'll go with a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Chairman, before the roll call vote, there was some discussion about provisionally approving these and then having some time before the next meeting for something to be cured. I guess for the person making the motion, or is this going to just say, look, they're conditionally approved, they move on to the next step in its entirety? Or are you looking for a limited term to cure the nexus question?
The one here with the motion, I would like to see that as a limited term to cure that. assuming that we can get that clarity from the project selection board on there, since right now it's open.
Question, if that's appropriate.
I think it probably is.
If we are asking them to come forward with letters of support or affiliation or whatever from a state entity, then that would be sufficient for the language as we interpret it. So I don't know that you would need a short-term approval.
So the understanding of the chairman is that upon provisional approval of the pre-application, all of these would move on to the full application, understanding that letter of support and the proof of coordination with a qualifying agency or entity is going to be part and parcel of the full application.
They would either have the relationship with a state entity or they would be ineligible.
Okay, so it's cured through the full application process or it's not.
That's fine. I'm okay with that lukewarm. I don't know if it's friendly or adversarial amendment, but I will say conditional upon a standing approved definition that can be relayed to the applicants before we get to the actual full application packet on there. I think that's fair. That's what we need to do. But yeah, I'm good with that moving forward, just as long as we can communicate that before that starts.
Before it starts, before the deadline.
Before the,
if we say it's before the clock starts, then, well, again, I guess we have 30 days, but
Yep.
then the approvals and the denials will not go out until that is remedied.
no, that's not what I'm saying, I think. So basically, as I've stated it, and it would be well, I guess thinking about it, since we said conditional approval, that does mean for a pre-application.
And I think, based on what the project selection board decides this should be, we're just moving them to the next round for consideration. If they still don't fit under what we define, then they just don't get any money. Like we just reject the application at that stage. Like we can, at this point, we're just moving them forward. We have to fix this obviously in the meantime, but once we get to the next stage, if we don't think this partnership is robust enough, whatever they suggested, then that would be a criteria and whether or not we make any funding decision to begin with. That would be part of a big, criteria, and say some of them will have great partnerships and some will have pretty bad partnerships. And that's just a criteria we'll use to judge the full application one way or the other. And at that point, they just get kicked out in the full application, which we're going to have to kick out a lot. Obviously, we don't have, $150 million to fund all of these.
So how much time are we talking? If we head through today before the 30 days ends?
I'm not sure what our deadline was or when the clock started.
Yeah.
It started with the deadline, which was last Friday
Mm-hmm.
at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody has a calendar in front of them.
So that's probably not realistic, considering we're already, a week into it tomorrow. I didn't want to have it where folks were in the middle of an application, spending a lot of time and effort on that application just to get down the road and go all the way to there, Emily, and then have us say, no, that's not what it was. So in this particular case, I think as long as we make the applicants aware of what the requirement is before that application, so within the next several weeks, as long as we make that known to the applicants that we conditionally move forward, it's not a conditional movement. They are free to turn in an application. So whether I need to state that a little differently on there, I can do that, but I don't think there's going to be time to resolve those particular applications or pre-applications, I'm sorry, before that period.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I think all applicants understand there's a risk they're taking with their time in terms of filling these out. So yeah, if we get the better direction in 30 days, that would be great. But I mean, at this point, they're all they know they're taking a risk even putting this thing together.
Well, there's a risk of getting it or not getting it. That's the way the world works, but I don't
But
want
also
that to
wasting
be
their
a
time,
risk
for
of
sure.
a changing
Yeah,
definition.
Yeah,
So
that's okay.
as long as we can get that done, and I'm saying we, since I sit on the selection board as well, I'm okay with the applications, pre-applications, sorry guys, pre-applications moving forward today to application if they have identified what I said before, a nexus or support from a public institution in Louisiana or the federal government.
Right. So just to be clear, I think you're saying that if, I think some of these that we're going to review today have no mention of any governmental agency at all.
That's correct.
Right. Okay.
Either state of Louisiana or federal.
Any further discussion about this? All right, I have a motion and a second.
Chest, you still good with that? On who's second? Yeah. Okay.
Angela,
So
Please.
for clarification, so are you saying, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, okay, so you sit there and you go through and you review all the applications today and you say, okay, we're going to provisionally accept these. So tomorrow everything goes out. And then within that 90 days that they have to submit that, that's when the clarification is needed.
My understanding is the project selection board within the next 30 days needs to issue instructions and specific guidelines of what we're going to be looking for within the next 30 days so that the applicants will know what they need to do in the full application.
Correct. So it would be, it's not a conditional approval. It would be, we would approve those pre-applications that met all of the criteria listed. And in the government tie, the nexus would be a state of Louisiana or political subdivision, all of those things listed, or a federal entity, federal agency actually on there would do that. That's fine. It's more of a challenge and a charge to the project selection board to ensure that we have a working and final definition of what that is before the applicants get too
Start their
far
90-day
afield in
window.
the full application.
So before
Correct.
they start their 90-day window.
Correct.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
also to review the 2 pre-applications that were in fact not forwarded at the Monday meeting.
wait, I just got lost. I thought we were starting the clock. I thought we were pre-approving them to move forward. Contingent upon them getting sufficient documentation for whatever the project selection board desires.
Yeah, I can't, I wouldn't start the clock until the project selection board makes that decision on language. So whether that's an issue or not, I don't want to get it to
I
where
think
we're
then-
holding up the wheel. here,
Yeah, I
so.
guess, I mean, we just need to go back to reconsideration of the rejected applications with the whatever Cole said, conditional approval of 90 days. I think because not knowing when the selection board's going to meet or whatever, and, we want to get them better guidance. We're going to promise we're going to do the best we can. But I mean, at this point, I think to keep the motion clean as possible, we'll give them the full 90 days. At some point, we'll come back and say, this is what we're actually going to be looking at. So if you want to keep continuing with writing your proposal, knock yourself out, but it doesn't look like good for you, so I think, yeah.
All right. Don't want to hold the applicants up there, but just to be clear with everyone here, we need to make sure that us as the tag and the project selection board has that clear definition in a timely fashion for the applicants on there. Since if we are to start, and I'm okay, I'll say that just so folks know and can prepare to take the next step on there, but we need to make sure we have that clearly defined and quickly.
We have the chairman's commitment to hold a meeting soon.
Yes, sir. We're going to try to have that meeting as soon as possible, understanding that 2 board members are currently in the session. And anyway, as soon as we can have it, we will do it. That's actually the guidance I was looking for is, are we going to go ahead and move forward the 90 days and then update that within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So those entities have a clear understanding of what partnership or sponsorship means? Or do you want to hold off on everybody's approval until after that definition can go out with that approval email and say, if you're an NGO partner working with this,
I think
that's sort of the.
I think we run a risk if we put it, if we say the clock doesn't start until the project selection board meets, and you don't meet until after our deadline to act occurs, then we are in violation of our deadline. So I would say that we do it if a friendly amendment, provisional approval. We give them provisional approval with the understanding that they have to abide by whatever decision the project selection board makes. And yeah, that may not be completely fair, but like Emily was saying earlier, a lot of these are going to go through this motion and not be selected anyhow. So there's going to be a lot of, I don't want to say wasted effort, but there's going to be a lot of effort on behalf of applicants that are not successful one way or the other, whether it's through this parsing out or just through their rankings.
So it's still not a conditional approval, though. It's an approval. It's a meets criteria. How about that? It meets current criteria.
Meets pre-application criteria.
Meets current pre-application criteria.
Yes.
Most of these might not meet full application
Cole,
criteria.
I would ask Cole, though, any concerns about starting a clock and changing the process after we do that?
I think that through this robust discussion, everyone is kind of aware, as Emily stated, of what the risks are. I think that they would probably appreciate consideration under a broader definition than what they were previously given to allow them to remain, in contention, understanding that there will be some direction forthcoming. Alternatively, you're about 7 days into a 30-day window. Scott, I know you don't want to run into your own deadline and offend your own deadline, but people know what the votes are. They know whether or not they've been approved by the vote. You could delay, formally starting the clock until the end of your 30 days to give the selection board some time to meet. That way you're not carving into their 90-day window. That's another option as well. Whenever formal notice is given, starts the clock, run out the rest of your 23-day window here.
Since I don't fully well, I was gonna say, since I don't fully support the concept, I will not interfere with the language. If that makes sense. Do whatever you want.
So I'm gonna go ahead and to clarify the motion on there, and folks feel free to do with, we can discuss this as you want, but I understand, Mr. Chairman, you're the chair of this particular body, but I don't want to mislead folks into somewhere that they are going to spend time going. I think we have a responsibility. We can exercise that responsibility. So I would not start the clock until the decision was made by the project selection board on the particular language. And that is part of this motion. We would not formally do that.
So it's provisional up until project selection board meets
Correct.
and acts.
And if we need to meet again, this particular body, and before our time goes out, then I would hope we could do that and take action one way or the other on that.
Sorry to ask a question, but is this evaluation happening on the materials that have already been submitted under the pre-application, or is this applying to the future full application? We're going to make that determination.
So right now we have pre-applications on hand, and that's the discussion right now. So as it is, I can review. We will also put anything forward today that has a nexus or some support therein of a public state of Louisiana or state of Louisiana public entity or the federal entity, federal agency, I should say, because there's a lot of, I'm not even sure what the difference in that language would be, but So yeah, and that would then go, the applicants, pre-applicants, however, would not be noticed and put on that 90-day clock until the project selection board has made a finalized ruling on what is the language of a public entity and what constitutes support or coordination, sorry.
That's what I thought we were talking about. Just making sure.
That's, if you understand it, that's great.
So
It's-
I think
Angela,
we have a
Angela
motion on the
needs to
table.
understand it is the big one. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Lazina, for acknowledging me. I would recommend.
I was closer. I thought I was blocking his view.
You were about blocking his view. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'd like to say that I think the provisional approval should be sufficient. And then we meet and we're going to set up a meeting with the project selection board as quickly as possible to come up with a definition. The entities are hearing this. Hopefully that this is all being recorded. I think a lot of great discussion happened on Monday on sort of where the boxes that weren't checked on that. Want to remind everyone the criteria is in the back of the manual that's going to be used to judge a full application. But we don't have a secondary meeting on these. These are in question. They're provisionally approved. They're already moving forward. They can do that, their partnership, and have that be part of that full application process. Partnership is a criteria within the full application, so it has a little bit more detail in there on how they define like partnerships. So I just think like we will hold off on sending emails until we can come up with a definition. We'll send the emails out to everybody and say the 90-day clock is starting. Here's the definition of partnership. Yeah, I'm sure that people who have a questionable partnership is going to leave this room starting to find some before then, and they'll be rectified before we actually have a chance to meet, being the session and everything. But that'd be my recommendation, that we don't have another meeting and then we have to do the emails afterwards. We just move forward with the full application, and then that could be as part of that full application review.
And that's the spirit of what I have, as long as if we aren't able to come together with that definition, we're not penalizing those individuals for some amount of time.
Yes, sir. And I'm just, the ones I'm
That's what
worried
I heard
about. Yes,
from
sir.
you there.
Yep,
Yep.
you're good.
Yep.
We'll have a meeting in the next 23 days.
Yep. And so now I don't want to try and get us all here together again to rehash all these things. So hopefully we move that today, and thanks for that. Yep, that works.
So Angela, you're clear on what the motion is. We have a motion and a second. I ask for Angela to give ask for a roll call vote. Oh, wait.
Making sure we still have a second after.
Yeah.
I'll reoffer the second.
And roll call vote, and call on me last.
Taylor Terrio on behalf of Brandon Burris.
Yay.
Chesson Hill,
Yay.
Theron Phillips,
Yay.
Amy Prayu,
Yes.
Sarah Krupa,
Yay.
Brian Lazina,
Yay.
Charles Sutcliffe,
Yay.
Ray Herndon,
Yay.
Emily Buxton,
Yay.
Lauren Berg,
Yay.
Scott Longman.
Nay. I'm a black and white person.
We have 10 yays and 1 nay.
Okay, so 1 hour on that one.
54 minutes.
I appreciate the discussion and working through that. All right. Next item up is to determine if each pre-application received meets the criteria for an invitation to complete a full application with the caveat of what we just went through.
Mr. Chairman, as a point of order, there was another component to that, which was reconsideration of the
Oh.
two previously
Thank you. Nobody
denied
yelled at me.
applications. So you thought you were done in an hour,
Yeah,
but you got
okay.
a little more work to do.
Thank you very much.
They're now eligible for reconsideration based on that vote. Where you take them up in the process, I think is kind of up to the committee. If you wanted to stick them at the back end, since the folks who are here to hear their applications may want to go first. Up to you, but they are now eligible for reconsideration.
I don't think this will take long, so I say we just go through them since they were Mondays. The first up would, for reconsideration, would be the Amite River Wildlife Sanctuary footbridges. That's number 27602-013. As I recall, and that was way back in Monday, they had no affiliation with anyone on their application. So in my opinion, they would still not be
Do they have
appropriate.
National Park Service? I'm sorry, we were to throw that stuff. I need to pull up this folder again. I thought they had Natural Park Service,
I do not.
Chapel National Heritage System.
I do not recall.
Let me look. You have very slow internet here, so doing the best I can. Okay, this project is, what is it called again?
Amite River Wildlife Sanctuary footbridges.
Okay, it's on the edge. Okay, the wildlife sanctuary is on the edge of a Chapel National Heritage Area. I don't know if that was the only reference they had.
I do not recall one. but
Yeah. I think you might be right. I don't see anything else on it.
Before we move forward, is there anyone here from the Baton Rouge Audubon Society that can answer the question? Okay. So reviewing that, does anybody have a motion on how to proceed?
My motion is that one stands as reviewed on Monday.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? Passes. This one is still not meeting criteria. All right, the second application for reconsideration is conservation of working lands at Live Oak Farm, Vermillion Parish, number 276-41224. And I did not rank it, so if someone else ranked it, I would ask that you go through the project category and considerations for me,
I can go through it.
please.
I had
Emily?
that they aligned with the plan, that it was contiguous, it wasn't underserved, there was a timely completion, not a clear stewardship requirement, and I think that's all the categories you wanted, right?
Well, project categories in the middle too.
Oh, the concert, sorry, I have so many papers in front of me. I believe it was with conservation of working lands was the category on that one. Yeah, conservation project and working lands.
All right, and any other items on that?
And they do have partnerships, but I need to pull up the application.
I had part of the easement was EPA and the other part was NRCS. So I guess those would be the partners.
And I believe Cindy mentioned some work with the Louisiana Department of Agriculture when she spoke on Monday. I don't know if she wants to clarify those comments.
I don't think it was in the application
Oh, it
itself,
wasn't in the
but
application, okay.
the affiliation with the NRCS is sufficient for the new guidance.
Yeah, that's in the application. Okay, then I make a motion to approve this application.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, then this one is provisionally approved.
Yes.
Okay, we have finished with the reconsiderations. So now we go on to consideration of the pre-applications for review today. The first pre-application for review is the efficient monitoring of Gulf Coast canids and white-tailed deer, number 276-56254. Upon my review, I did not see a state entity, and with our new guidance, I did not also see a relationship with a federal or Louisiana entity. Did anybody see anything different? And in my opinion, if we did not find anything different in this pre-application, it is insufficient and does not meet the criteria. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Motion.
We have a motion to thank you. Disqualify this one. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? Hearing none, this one is disqualified. Right, moving on to our second one. The next pre-application is conservation acquisition and addition to Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge, Cameron Parish, Louisiana, number 275-42465. I selected that it was a non-governmental organization working with a public agency. It was Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries and the Conservation Fund. Under project category, I selected land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat, and conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use, as well as conservation project on historic properties adjacent to or integral to habitat restoration or enhancement. Does anybody disagree with that or have any other selections? Hearing none, I'll move on to considerations. I selected all considerations. Does anybody disagree with that or have anything else? All right, then going through that, it is my interpretation that this meets the criteria. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do we have a second? Second, any opposition? All right, then I'm selecting this one as moving forward. Next up, I have expansion of basin-wide monitoring program, number 276-56842. This one upon review was only the Pontchartrain Conservancy that I recall, which I do not think fits local governing authority, political subdivision of the state, or state agency. Does anybody disagree with that?
I had a question. I'm unsure. I do know the Pontchartrain Conservancy was designated in statute, and since we don't have anyone here to say that, now I don't know if that's enough. It's always been kind of a gray area with that, but I'd like to get something a little more official on that one.
Do we have
So-
anybody here to comment from the this pre-application?
The application does say match commitments of 12 sites have been funded through the Pontchartrain Basin Restoration Program overseen by US EPA. I don't know if we would consider that sufficient.
No, that's it. It's EPA doesn't make the decision on that particular funding, is a sub-awardee. So I would say this one depends, at least for me, on whether or not the definition of this entity.
Of what the entity is entirely, yeah.
I actually went to their website and couldn't find no confirmation of them being a political subdivision or, well, I guess we have a political subdivision of some sort.
They definitely were at some point. They were
they were.
created in statute in some way or but because
Yeah.
they did have like gubernatorial appointees.
Still
on
does.
the entity, it still does. So in some way, it must be somewhat politically affiliated, right? If it has gubernatorial appointees on it.
It's always been an interesting question. I don't know the answer. Yeah, they are similar to our fisheries task forces. There are government seats on that particular entity on a board. So it does have public directors, but they are non-voting directors for the most part.
Does
So-
anyone in the audience want to comment on whether PC is a federal or state entity?
Please come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Dewey, representing Pontchartrain Conservancy. I'm sorry, I was out in the hall talking about this very important program. They are planning on coordinating and in fact partnering with DEQ on this project, obviously a state agency, and they also are definitely able to meet with your requirements as noted earlier, that they would get a letter of support for from the entity within the deadline? Does
Or
that
they
answer
have-
the question? I'm sorry.
Well, that, I don't believe that was anywhere in the application that I saw, but are they considered a political subdivision of the state?
Who, PC? I'm sorry, you
Yes.
mean Pontchartrain Conservancy itself?
Correct.
No, they are not considered a political subdivision of the state.
But they have gubernatorial appointees, don't they? And so they were at one point considered some sort of governor.
Oh, gosh,
Entity.
this is a really interesting question. They, back in, at their inception, I think in 90, way back in the day, they were, had a startup funding from a pocket in the state to get them, get their earliest group foundation organized, to the discussion group that eventually set up the NGO itself. But since then, they are not a state entity. And more recently, they've changed their designation several years ago, even further when their name was changed. But if you all need documentation, I will definitely have to get that from the organization, from Christie Trail, to support whatever questions you have. And again, I apologize, I was out of the room. I didn't hear any of this discussion. Do you have any questions about the application, or is this, that there's this just a concern about it being a state entity or a state entity itself, or receiving in receipt of state funds?
Based on the conversation we just had, the application needs to make clear that if they're an NGO, that they're working with a state entity of some sort. This application doesn't make that clear. So we're just trying to find a nexus for that.
Okay, well, they do have state board members
They,
on their board. They have 4 state board members that are on their board.
but that was also when they were formed in statute, it was under the Expressway Commission, I believe, too. And that's how it started. They are no longer that affiliation after the startup was done. Like you said, that original, I understand they have state members on there. I just was one of them at one point
Right, you
in
were.
life. But I think given the application in front of us, we need to, if they are not, then I don't see any other entities listed on there.
So you can't hear that Brady is on Zoom. He is not able to communicate. He's just watching Brady Skaggs, Dr. Skaggs from PC, participating on the Zoom call. Okay. I know that he had his hand up about some of the questions you had when I was outside, and I guess we can't hear him. There's no way to communicate and connect with him right now. I'm trying to get some more information, and if I can, I'll get back to you. Is there any way to pass over this for the moment or not?
I think maybe if we could come back to it at the end and see if she can communicate with somebody. I'm looking on PDF page 4 of the application, and the first paragraph ends with a sentence. PC has utilized data to establish predictive models in partnership with the LDH, area research institutions, and the US EPA. I'm not sure if that's referring to past partnerships or this one. Maybe we can get some clarification. We can circle back to this one.
All right, is there, what is the will of the board?
Motion is to pass over this application for the present moment.
Oh, to just set it aside until?
Yeah.
Oh,
Apologies, I did not, I guess that we did not realize that the Zoom communication was not interactive on Brady's end. So I'm going to go make some calls and I'll get some notes and bring them back to you, okay? Thank you.
General Counsel, is that,
I was just going to talk about the Zoom. So public open meetings laws require in-person discussion and vote of voice. There's no declaration of emergency that would allow for electronic meetings at this time. I know Sharon Hewitt's got a bill going through that might change that, but that's the reason. But sounds like you got a motion on the table to temporarily table this.
okay, do we have a second? Any opposition? Hearing none, we'll set this one aside literally. Okay, next is Russell Sage and Bodcall WMA Enhancement, number 276566968. I have it designated as a state agency, which is the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. And under project category, I selected all except for the land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat. Does anybody disagree with that or have any other considerations? Going on to considerations, I selected everything except for is the project in an underserved area or area of designated need. Does anybody have anything different on that? All right. Then in my opinion, it does qualify to move forward. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? All right, then I'm marking this one as moving forward. Next up is False River Emergency Access Project, number 27657015. Under the applicant partner, I have local governing authority, which is Point Capee Parish Government. Then, when I came to project category, I could not find an applicable project category that fits this pre-application. Did anybody in their review find a project category that this would fit? Okay, then, in my opinion, since it does not qualify for any of the project categories, it is insufficient and does not meet going forward. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, and I'll mark that this one was found insufficient and does not move forward. Next up is Russell Sage WMA Enhancement number 2, number 276570007. Applicant partner is a state agency, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Under project category, I selected all except for the first one, land conservation of important natural areas. Under considerations, I selected everything except for the underserved area. Does anybody disagree with any of those or have anything different?
You said for categories, you selected all except,
Except for underserved.
oh, for considerations.
Correct, I'm
I meant
sorry.
for categories.
Categories, I selected all except for the first one, land conservation of important natural areas. Does anybody have anything different or disagree?
I had 1 and 2 selected. Land conservation and water quality projects.
It was also forested lands. It is active forest management on the property and public use. Or you're just saying just add number 1. Okay, sorry. I am okay with that. All right. In my opinion, this is applicable to move forward. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? It's hearing none. I am marking this as moving forward. Next pre-application is the Zalman's Boat Launch, number 2765696. The applicant partner I have as a local governing authority, which is St. Charles Parish. Under project category, I selected conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody disagree with that or have another selection? Hearing none under considerations, I selected everything except for aligning with the state plan, contiguous with conservation properties, and underserved area. Does anybody disagree with that? Hearing none, I do find that this is appropriate to move forward, and I will entertain a motion. Have a motion. Do I have a second? Any opposition? Hearing none, I'm marking this moving forward. Next pre-application is Abita Springs Conservation Area and Nature Center, number 27657-030. Applicant partner I have as local governing authority, which is the town of Abita Springs. Under project category, I selected land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat, and conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody disagree or have another selection?
I would like to add the second one, water quality projects.
Okay. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, does anybody have any other selections? All right, under considerations, I said no to, does the pre-application describe funding or other type of match? Did not have any match. And I selected all other categories except for aligning with a state plan and contiguous with conservation properties. Does anybody disagree with that?
I had indicated that it mentioned match or other funds, but I can't recall specifically. I just had that indicated and I'll have to check and see my notes.
I think it was the letter of support that's attached.
Oh, okay.
The town of Abita Springs is committed to a 10% financial match, although I don't know if that was captured in the budget, but.
I don't think it was in the budget, but I will amend my application to state that. In my opinion, this is sufficient to move forward. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? Hearing none, I mark this moving forward. Next pre-application is Cowhead Bayou Watershed Hydrologic Improvements and Ecological Enhancements, number 276-50348. Under applicant partner, I selected local governing authority, which is Point Coupee Parish. Under project category, I selected water quality projects related to land conservation or land management, including those lands that protect drinking water supplies. Does anybody disagree with that or have another selection?
I had conservation and working farms. Working land.
Okay, I will add that. All right, under considerations, I put no to, does it describe funding or other type of match? Unless I missed another letter. I did not find that. It did not align with the state plan, and also I didn't see anything about underserved area, but I selected yes to everything else. Does anybody disagree with that or have another selection? Right, again, in my opinion, it is applicable for this to move forward. Does anybody have a motion?
So moved.
Is a second? Do we have a second? All right, motion and second. Anybody opposed? All right, hearing none, I will move this forward. Next pre-application is Gomesa Shoreline Protection on Southwest Point at Southwest Pass, number 276-55285. Under applicant partner, I have local governing authority, that is Vermilion Parish Police Jury. Under project category, I have land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat, and conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody have anything additional or disagree with that? Hearing nothing, I have under considerations, I said yes to the first three, no to the state plan. Contiguous with conservation properties, I put ish. It's close. And I didn't select anything else. Does anybody have anything different or disagree with that? Hearing nothing, I recommend that we move this one forward for approval.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, I move this forward. Next pre-application is Lake Charles Boardwalk Land Conservation Project, number 276-57616. The applicant partner is local governing authority, and that is the city of Lake Charles. Under project category, I selected land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat, water quality projects related to land conservation or land management, including those lands that protect drinking water supplies, and conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody disagree with that or have another selection? Moving on to considerations, I selected everything except state plan, contiguous with conservation properties, and underserved. Does anybody disagree with that or have other selections? All right, then I think this is appropriate to move forward. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any opposition? Hearing none, I move this forward. Next up is CC Road Preserve Longleaf Flatwoods Expansion. And I believe the correct number is 27657466. I have applicant partner as non-governmental organization working with a public agency, and that is the Nature Conservancy and LDWF. Now, this is one of the ones that has a letter of support and not co-applicant or something of that nature. So does everyone support moving this forward with provisional based off of our language?
So moved.
Okay, then I'll move on. Does anybody have opposition to that? That's more for just discussion. Okay. Under project category, I selected land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat, water quality projects related to land conservation or land management, including those lands that protect drinking water supplies, and conservation project on working land, farms, and forested land. Excuse me. Does anybody have any additions or disagree with those selections? Hearing none, under considerations, I selected yes to everything except underserved area. Does anybody disagree or have another selection? Hearing none, I recommend this move forward. Do I have a motion?
I motion.
Do I have a second? Any opposition? Hearing none, we move it forward. Next up, I have a pre-application Bayou Lures Phase 5 Terraces, number 276-59629. Under applicant partner, I have political subdivision of the state, Lafourche Terrebonne Soil and Water Conservation District. Under project category, I have land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat, and water quality projects related to land conservation or land management, including those lands that protect drinking water supplies. Does anybody have anything different or disagree? Hearing none, under considerations, I selected everything except contiguous with other conservation properties and underserved area. Does anybody disagree with that? All right, under these selections, it is appropriate to move forward. I'll entertain a motion.
I move.
Got a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? Then I'm marking this move forward. Next pre-application is recreational improvements to the Mermentau boat launch, number 27660011. I'm in duplicates. Application partner is a local governing authority, the Acadia Parish Police Jury. Under project category, I selected conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody disagree with that or have another selection? Hearing none under considerations, I selected yes to everything except contiguous with other conservation properties. Does anybody disagree with that or have another selection? Hearing none, I think it's appropriate to move forward. I'll entertain a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? Hearing none, we move this forward. Next pre-application is New Orleans Paddle, number 276-56601. Upon review of this application, I could find no partner that was appropriate to the legislation. Did anybody find anything different than that? Then I find that there is no applicable partner and this is insufficient to move forward. Oh, is there someone, I'm sorry, I should have said that. Is there someone here that can speak to this? Please go to the podium and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Rhonda Ardwin. I'm the organizer of Proud to Paddle Home. This is our first application and we were unclear on the entity part as well. I do have meetings with the State Representative Willard in that District 97. So we are actually acquiring more, I guess you could say, concrete support rather than just members of the community.
Unfortunately, legislative support it was not also sufficient. It would have to be someone, a local governing authority, a political subdivision of the state, or a state agency.
So could you give me some examples like the City of New Orleans, the City
Correct.
Parks, Recreation?
Yes.
Was
City of
kind
New
of,
Orleans.
I was kind of broad, excuse our ignorance on that.
Oh, no problem.
If we were able to secure that in the 90 days, would that be sufficient?
Unfortunately, under our current guidance, it would have to have been in the application to give us the ability to give provisional authority. It said something. You had to have some entity. If you had had a federal entity, it would not have been eligible in the other guidance, but it would be eligible now. So you had no other person other than this NGO.
Yeah, we have no problem with being denied later on, but obviously need to.
I understand and I wish I could, but the rules as they stand do not allow for that. I appreciate the application and your efforts, but thank you all. All right, hearing that, do I have a motion? I have a motion to deny. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Do I have any opposition? All right, this one is found insufficient and does not move forward. Sorry. Next pre-application is Coastal Wetlands Park Boardwalk, number 27660243. Under applicant partner, I selected political subdivision of the state, the Greater Lafourche Port Commission. And the project category, I selected conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody disagree with that or have another selection? Hearing none under considerations, I selected yes to everything except state plan, contiguous with conservation properties, and underserved area. Does anybody disagree with that? All right, reviewing this, I recommend that it moves forward. Do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? I mark this moves forward. Next application, pre-application is the Wharf's Bird Tower, number 276-27172. Under applicant partner, I have local governing authority, the City of Oswego. Under project category, I have conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Under considerations, I selected yes to the cost outline and pre-application, but no to other types of match. No to state plan, no to a timely completion schedule, and no to a maintenance and management. Does anybody disagree with those selections? Sure. Please come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Yes.
And I will state that those findings in and of themselves would not disqualify you.
Okay. My name is Councilwoman Lisa Valance, City of West Wego, and I'm here with Mayor Billiot and Councilman Utley. I'd just like to say, as far as the match, I guess I wasn't totally clear. The wharf is a project the city is working on that between purchase of property and current projects is at least an $8.2 million project that we've been cobbling money together from state and other sources. So I guess I viewed that as in kind, in that we own the property. And so the total wharf project is closer to $8 or $9 million. And we're asking for funds to help us build a bird tower and other educational programs to go along with it. As far as maintenance, we would maintain it as the city. We are developing the program for that as we speak. And as far as timeline, I did put in there that we plan to open the program in the wharf project. We hope to be open by 2024, and the bird tower would be included in that. Thank you.
Oh, sure. And thank you for that information. And I will say, we mentioned this at the last meeting, that these discussions under considerations are things that applicants should, if they move forward, see that as an area to flesh out and to improve upon. Also to bring forward for discussion, in my review of it, it was not on letterhead. The letter from the city was not signed, but there was also a letter of support from the senator. Not being on letterhead and not being signed makes me, it's like, who's this from kind of thing. So, okay. Does anybody else have any comments or concerns on this one?
No, I think since they're here today to clarify that, I think we're good.
We'll have to see some ID. No, I'm kidding.
That's right.
All right, I will entertain a motion. I have a motion and a second. Anybody in opposition? All right, and I'm marking this move forward. And yeah, for anybody else in the audience or watching this, please listen to the considerations of the board and address them in your application, because that's what you will be graded on. The next pre-application is the old LA Highway 1 Conservation and Recreation Area, number 276-59189. Under applicant partner, I have local governing authority, the Lafourche Parish Government. Under project category, I selected conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody disagree or have another selection? Hearing none, moving into considerations, I said yes to the cost outline, but no to any funding or type of match. And then no to aligning with a state plan contiguous with conservation areas or underserved area. Does anybody disagree with that? All right, reviewing this project, I think it's sufficient to move forward. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any opposition? Hearing none, I mark this to move forward. Next up is applying ecosystem benefits to public access improvements at Monkus Park, number 276-57968. Under applicant partner, I selected non-government organization working with public agency. And that is Moncus Park and Lafayette Consolidated Government. Upon review of this application, I think it was somewhat deficient under the previous language, but it could get provisional approval with our new language. Does everyone agree with that on the board? Any opposition to moving forward with? Okay, then under project category, I selected water quality projects related to land conservation or land management, including those lands that protect drinking water supplies, and conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody disagree with that or have another selection? Under considerations, I selected yes to everything except contiguous with other conservation properties and underserved area. Does anybody disagree? All right.
I wasn't clear on schedule and maintenance. Did I miss that?
I thought I found it. I have it marked yes.
Yeah, I have 18 months completion. Yeah.
All right, upon review, I think it is, in my opinion, it is sufficient. I'll entertain a motion for provisional approval. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Any opposition? All right, I move this forward with provisional. Need to work on their applicant partner. The next pre-application is wildlife habitat conservation through prescribed fire, number 27661029. The applicant partner is a non-governmental organization working with public agency, the American Bird Conservancy, and Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. This is another one in review, just had a discussion about working with the agency. So I think we would have to give provisional approval and allow them to flesh that out. Does anybody disagree with that? Does everybody agree with that? Okay, then I'll move on. Under project category, I selected land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat, conservation project on working land farms and forested land, and conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody disagree or have another selection? All right, under considerations, I selected yes to everything except underserved area and maintenance and management of the project. Does anybody disagree? Okay, then I recommend that we move forward with provisional approval on this one. I look for a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? Hearing none, I give this provisional approval. Next pre-application is a wetland park land conservation and wildlife habitat project, number 27656-295. Under applicant partner, I selected non-governmental organization working with a public agency. It's Sankofa and the city of New Orleans. However, in review, it seemed like it needed some more information. I was unsure of the involvement with New Orleans. There was also some issues with budget and timeline. Is there anybody here from this project to speak or answer any questions?
So I'm familiar with this project somewhat. I believe their wetland park is on City of New Orleans Sewage and Water Board property. And I believe that CPRA has funded it as well through their Restoration and Partnership Fund. I don't know if CPRA put in a letter or anything, but I'm pretty sure the land they have this on is city property.
I believe there was a letter of support for it, if I remember right. Yeah, from the city of New Orleans, but then it wasn't mentioned like in the applications.
No, that the only language was that they had a cooperative endeavor agreement with the city of New Orleans to develop this for that need. No, we did not put a letter of support and we were not asked. So
All right, I would guess that this would be sufficient for provisional approval in order to flesh that out. Does the board agree with that or disagree with that? Everybody agrees with that? No disagreement? All right, then moving on, under project category, I selected land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat. Water quality projects related to land conservation or land management, including those lands that protect drinking water supplies. And conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody have another selection or disagree with those? Okay, under considerations, I selected yes to everything except contiguous with conservation properties, schedule for timely completion, and a maintenance and management plan. Does anybody disagree with that? Or did they find that in there? Okay, then again, like some of the other applications, if anybody from this group is listening, I ask that you work on those considerations and firm that up. But I do see that it is sufficient for moving forward, and I'll look for a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any opposition? Hearing none, I mark it for provisional moving forward. Next pre-application is water quality improvements through pump station litter abatement, number 27661359. The applicant partner was a local governing authority, Jefferson Parish Government. However, it was not on letterhead, and it just kind of mentioned that it was Jefferson Parish Government. Is there anyone here from Jefferson Parish Government on this application? There was no letter. I would kind of recommend that we make this provisional based off of getting a solid letter of support or authorization from the parish. Discussion.
I mean, also just the category that this falls under, aren't they just collecting litter at a pump station? How is this falling under any of the categories provided anyways?
Let's solve that first riddle first, and then we'll move on to that one. Is everybody okay with the provisional approval based off of getting some more information from the parish? Okay, then moving on to project category, I maybe went out on a limb, but selected water quality projects related to land conservation or land management, including those lands that protect drinking water supplies. Does anybody disagree with that?
I mean, I don't necessarily see how litter pickup is necessarily water quality improvement, but I'm not gonna die on that mountain, so.
Okay. And then under considerations, I said yes to the first three and said no to state plan, contiguous conservation properties, underserved area, schedule for time to completion, and maintenance and management. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, like I said before, I asked that the applicant, the Jefferson Parish Government, work on those considerations and flesh out that authorization letter from the parish. But other than that, I recommend moving forward. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? No, thought I was going to get opposition. Then I move this forward. Okay, next pre-application is Coates Bluff Nature Trail Expansion Grant, number 27662754. Under applicant partner, I selected non-governmental organization working with public agency, Friends of Coates Bluff Nature Trail and the City of Shreveport. One concern that I saw in there was there was no signature on the letter. The letter of support was different part of the City of Shreveport than the letter than was mentioned in the application itself. Still City of Shreveport, so I guess that is still sufficient, but it seemed confusing. But so I would recommend that we go with provisional, so they can iron that information out before we move on to the rest of it. Is everybody okay with moving forward as provisional approval?
Yes.
Or you disagree? Okay. Then under project categories, I've put land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat, and conservation project on recreational properties related to important natural areas and public use. Does anybody disagree or have another selection?
Coates Bluff, I had also historic properties adjacent to.
I had that
historic
as well.
properties.
Okay, I will amend mine to add that. Any other? Okay. Then under consideration, I put is the total cost outlined in the pre-application-ish. Yes, it was kind of all over. I did not find any kind of match. They did.
We knew the value of the current GoFundMe campaign.
Yeah, it was not contiguous with other properties. I did not see a schedule for time to completion, and I did not see a maintenance or management. The budget, I didn't see a budget. Yeah, and and then there was the letters of support. So what's the will of the board on this?
I vote we move it forward. I think this is a fully volunteer-run organization, which is maybe why the application is somewhat lacking, but hopefully if they're listening, they know they can make some changes in the full application, provisional.
All right, if you read the application, they said, I hope you just read my application. So, yeah, okay. So do I have a motion to move this forward?
Moved.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any opposition? Hearing none, I move this forward, but if you're listening, please flesh this out. Next up is the Turn Island Protection and Restoration, Phase 1, number 276627773. The applicant partner is Political Subdivision of the State, Grand Isle Independent Levy District. And under project category, I selected land conservation of important natural areas, including fish and wildlife habitat. Does anybody have anything different?
I also had working land.
They tried to throw that oyster beds in there. I'm okay if y'all are okay with that. Does anybody else have that? No? You want to put it in there? I'll put a half a check. Under considerations, I selected yes to cost outlined. I did not, well, there was no match. And then yes to benefits in the future, no to state plan, no to contiguous, no to underserved, and then yes to the schedule for completion and the maintenance. Does anybody have anything different? All right, I consider this appropriate to move forward. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? A motion and a second, any opposition? Hearing none, I move this forward. All right, the last one of this list is Bogachita Conservation and Recreation Corridor Initiative, number 27663636. I marked down under applicant partner, the non-governmental organization working with a public agency. It's the Trust for Public Land, Office of State Parks, and Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Under project categories, I selected the first four. Does anybody have a different or disagree? Under considerations, I selected them all. Does anybody disagree with that? Right, I find this sufficient and recommend that we move forward. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any opposition? Sorry. Hearing none, I select to move forward. All right, that is the list. I will go back to the one we set aside.
Does the applicant want to make a comment on this one?
Oops, sorry.
Yes.
All right,
Cynthia
so
Dewey.
we are going back to the expansion of basin-wide monitoring program number 27656842. And the question was whether or not Pontchartrain Conservancy was an applicable entity. You have some information.
Yes, yes. This is Cynthia Dewey again, representing Pontchartrain Conservancy. I've been able to speak to the applicant outside, Brady Skaggs, Dr. Brady Skaggs, who is noted is on Zoom, but unable to communicate. So in his comments, he noted to me that Pontchartrain Conservancy is a 501c3 NGO. Pontchartrain Conservancy does have several state entities and actors on their board, and they have since their inception. They maintain strong partnerships with the state. For this particular application, they will be working on a water quality monitoring suite of data that is specific to scenic rivers. In this case, this data is needed and will be collected for the advancement of the Clean Water Act report, the triennial review of all watersheds of Louisiana. It's called the Integrated Report. And LDEQ uses Pontchartrain Conservancy's data every 3 years to conduct this report and present that to EPA. It's a long-standing partnership. We do not have a letter of support in this packet as of now because it was unclear to us at the time, as others have noted, that we needed that specific connection and tie-in. But if you look at, I believe, page 4, you see there is the tie-in. This is specifically what this data is to be used for, and we would request provisional approval so that we can get that letter of support to you.
Thank you for that information. I don't see where this is an application with another entity like DEQ. I think they were just users of the data. Does anybody on the board feel differently than that upon this gaining this information? I appreciate the work. I appreciate the application, but in my opinion, this is just an NGO without an applicable partner. So I do not see where it is sufficient to move forward.
Yes, I can ask a question of Ms. Dewey.
Sure.
So the sentence on page 4 that discusses utilizing data to establish predictive models in partnership with the LDH and the US EPA, what sort of partnership is that? Is it something that's ongoing? It sounds like what you just said.
It's ongoing for many, many years. And that is probably why the folks that are embedded in the organization that write this potentially wrote this, making an assumption that that was well-known information, but perhaps not to this group. This is a long-standing, many-year partnership where PC's data is the backbone and is used for the completion of these federal report requirements.
Is there a written agreement memorializing? the
That is a
partnership,
very good
or-
question. I don't know if there's an MOU. I'm not aware of whether or not there's a specific agreement. It is more that this is available public data and it is found nowhere else. No other entity collects this data in this quantity. And so we have been utilized, PC has been utilized for many, many years as the source of this additional information to couple with the agency's limited data sets.
Gosh, I think that's a tough one.
Any other questions? If you have information relative to this project, please come up to the podium and introduce yourself.
Karen Gotro with the Nature Conservancy and formerly Deputy Secretary of the Department of Environmental Quality. And I know, and I'm not sure what the arrangement is, and this is my first involvement in this conversation, but I do know that triennial report is very important. It helps identify impaired streams for regulatory purposes. So I think it is a direct need. And I think it's more than just somebody generating information that you can use, that the department really utilizes this data for federal reporting. So I would just encourage maybe getting more information if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
As the representative for DEQ, I do not work in that section. However, I know they do use third-party data, including some data from Pontchartrain Conservancy in their integrated report, but it is not dependent on it, but it is used in it.
Right. And unfortunately, it seems like, yeah, that the product is used by a state agency, but in my opinion, the state agency is not a partner. But I'm open for discussion on this. In my opinion, it is insufficient. Do I have a motion? One way or the other. We got to pick a direction. You want to have further discussion?
Well, I'm thinking about making a motion to move this forward provisionally. But I guess I might ask Ms. Dewey again, what sort of information would you be able to provide from DEQ or LDH? Would you be able to enter into an agreement with them, or is there going to be some cooperative endeavor or something like that?
It's just so awkward because we haven't asked them, as Ms. Pro can attest to. The reason we wanted provisional approval today is so that we would have time to speak to our good friends over there and ask rather than say we've already had them on the hook for something. And I was somewhat under the impression that that was what the provisional qualification was all about.
Correct. The provisional application is for if we see some interaction with another agency. But again, in my opinion, this looks like data. It's a good program. Nothing against the program, like I've said before in this venue, but I don't see where this is a NGO tied to a public partner in this application. It talked about where the data from this would go, but it is not a partnership with a state entity or now a federal entity, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm afraid I think I have to agree with you. I think what she just said kind of clarifies that. She hadn't spoken with them yet, so.
Do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second? Motion is to rule is insufficient.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do I have any opposition?
Abstain.
So hearing no opposition, I rule this insufficient and set it aside.
Thank you for your time, everybody. We appreciate it.
All right. Okay, so that is all the pre-applications we have. At this time, I will receive public comment. If anybody from the public wishes to speak, please come to the podium. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I want to thank Angela for all the hard work, getting the minutes turned around as quickly as she did so that we could review them in time for this meeting to approve again, and keeping all these documents straight. So I appreciate your efforts. And thank you to the board for reviewing all these documents and making these decisions. And I ask all applicants understand that this is not personal. This is not against you or the work that you do, but also you have to understand that this board is a group of conservation-minded people who are working to put conservation on the ground through this great program, through the guidance we're given. And we have to vote our conscience with that guidance. So it's not an affront to you or your program. And I would hope that you would treat us with respect that that is deserved of this board, and appreciate the actions taken. So I really thank the board for all this time, and it's only going to get harder from here. So I appreciate it. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.